I got it.
What is it?
I don't know. I've never seen anything like that.
Where's it at?
By 12 o'clock, into that tree line, 200 yards.
We are talking Bone Cold. This is directed and written by Billy Hanson. And this is a movie I've actually been wanting to watch for a little while now, and have finally kind of got round to it. And it's a kind of military horror action movie with elements of Predator, Sniper, and a heavy theme of PTSD. It is a low budget movie, but it's one that I think hides the budget kind of pretty well. It's a 2022 film, and it actually takes place primarily in Ukraine. Now, you might be thinking, oh, is this about the Ukraine-Russia war? No, this was, I assume, made before that was kind of kicking off, so it's not really part of the story here, but it does take place in the kind of primarily on the Ukraine-Russia border, and it's a military movie, so there is that kind of obviously overtone in there as well. What is the story? It focuses on this sniper team. We've got our main guy who's the actual sniper, and his partner who is the spotter. And we see at the beginning of the movie they're on a mission in Afghanistan, and the guy who is the sniper is suffering from PTSD. You know, he feels ultimately guilt, having, you know, killing people and things like this. He reassures himself the fact that being a sniper is about, you know, reducing the amount of collateral damage and kind of being very specific about the targets. You know, you return home and they're almost immediately again sent on another mission, this time, as I mentioned, in Ukraine. And they're sent to take out this commander, this kind of like military, kind of militia commander. And when they're there, there's a number of things that don't seem quite right. There was another team sent before them that were kind of withdrawn for strange reasons. There seems to be some creature in the woods, almost, that seems to be stalking them, and we don't know quite what that is. And then things take a bit more of a worse turn when they assassinate what they think is the target, but it turns out that's just a civilian, and they killed the wrong person, which sends our sniper deeper into PTSD, because his whole thing is, you know, he feels like he is reducing the amount of collateral damage, and here he is having just killed a innocent man. And things escalate when now this kind of obviously spooks the real target, and we have more kind of like militia wanting to kind of like find out what's going on and ultimately proving more of a problem. And this strange, possibly mythological kind of cryptid creature seems to be stalking them with a malicious thought in mind. Now, what will happen, you'll have to watch the movie and find out. So this is one of these films where I am leaving a reasonable amount out of the plot here, because there's questions that this movie will ask of you. And it's a film that is somewhat ambiguous into what's going on. I will say that right up the front. And it is, generally speaking, a slow film. But let's talk about the positives. I've got to be honest with you, I thought this was a well put together film for the most part. It is a low budget film, but I think the movie does a good job of making you forget that, outside of a couple of little kind of moments where I'll talk about in a little bit. But for the most part, I think this movie looks like it's shot very well. The majority of the time we're taking place in the kind of the natural environment, this kind of snowy wilderness, which is kind of obviously doubling for Ukraine. And because obviously we're shooting out in the woods, and that's not somewhere which is going to cost a lot of money to kind of like, decorate sets or kind of like make kind of elaborate kind of like location shoots and things like that. It's relatively kind of a cheap shoot, so it looks really good because they've obviously used the budget well there. But I've got to say, even though I think if you were maybe a military person, you might pick out some kind of flaws in maybe their kind of tactics and stuff. I think they could have seemed quite genuine in regards to the one little caveat which I'll come on to. You know, obviously it seems like a taut military thriller for a lot of the time. So this is not like a kind of like a guns blazing action film along the lines of Predator, even though there are certainly story elements here that kind of seem similar. These guys take their time, they're slow and steady. It's all about kind of like confirming the target and kind of getting that shot so they can kind of like one shot, one kill, you know, without kind of the collateral damage, things like this. So it's a slower film. It's not like there's like massive gun battles. There's kind of one towards the end, but for the most part it's a slower movie. It's more of a kind of a paced like a thriller to a certain degree, as I've mentioned. I think it's actually kind of handled pretty well and becomes quite tense at times, and I thought that was, you know, down to the kind of obviously the writing, directing, and the acting on screen, which I thought was very good. Now, as I've mentioned, one of the kind of themes here is PTSD, and I think also just the guilt of particularly this act of where they killed the you know, the wrong guy really weighs on this kind of this character of our main guy, this sniper. And I thought the actor did a great job of really kind of, you know, showing you how that kind of is weighing on him, and as the film goes on, he's, you know, he's having various kind of mental difficulties dealing with it, and kind of, you know, pulling himself back, and then kind of it's starting to kind of like affect him more. And the way this kind of has this kind of creature involved as well is, I'm going to be honest with you, it's one of these films where it's ambiguous to what's going on. Is this creature genuinely out there? Is it some type of, I think maybe a Wendigo, which is out there kind of stalking these guys? Or is it kind of like a figment of a damaged mind caused by PTSD? There is evidence for both. There is strong evidence for both. Does it tell you one way or the other? I am not going to tell you that. But let me just say, you can maybe look at this of one of two ways, you know. But nonetheless, you know, in regards to the creature, it's very much a kind of Predator-style creature in a way. It's not like a one with lots of tech, but it's clearly humanoid. It looks like it's got some type of human clothing on, but it's kind of monstrous, and it has a kind of like cloaking ability, a little bit like the kind of the Predator and things like that. And it's obviously certainly dangerous. Certainly, we see it, you know, rip someone's head off, for example. So it certainly feels like a Predator-style kind of monster to a large degree. I have to say, I think the actual military side of it, the kind of the more action, more human-orientated kind of conflicts are handled a little bit better, to be honest with you, and that's where I feel the movie is at its strongest. It's actually when it's more of a straight military film than anything else. That's definitely its strong suit here. I think the creature stuff is intriguing, but it has some problems, which we'll come on to. But I've got to say, I think for the most part, it's filmed really well. I think it does create a good sense of tension. It's an intriguing story with kind of like with multiple prongs in the fire. You know, we have a few kind of like themes that this kind of story is juggling all at the same time. Some of which are more successful than others. But we've got a great camaraderie between our kind of two kind of military operators here. I thought they did a good job of seeming like friends, but also, you know, they're professionals on the job for the most part. So that I all kind of quite liked, and you know, again, it has that sort of psychological element as well. The effects that war has on the soldier, and how it can affect even kind of the strongest mind. So again, I can't go say too much more about this, because I think I'll spoil stuff. And this movie is somewhat predicated on how you think of it, and I don't want to influence it, to be honest. But overall, I have to say, I kind of quite enjoyed it, all until maybe the last 20 minutes. If it had stopped about 20 minutes before it actually does, I still think you would have got the point of where the story is going, but it wouldn't have seemed quite as dragged out as it does. And this is where now we're going to transition to what doesn't work. So yeah, so I feel this movie overreaches a little bit. The third act is the weakest, even though it has kind of the most action in it. We do get quite a good sequence where we have a kind of a shootout of this kind of like this base, and it's the most action packed. That is good, but then we have the kind of the more meat on the bones, certainly in regards to this creature, certainly in regards to how the PTSD affects it. Then once we kind of get back to the States, you know, we have a protracted sort of sequences where we are dealing with the aftermath, and that's where I really feel it starts to lose me, because it got very convoluted. I didn't think it was necessary. I actually thought they got the point across just fine without even having this kind of like 20-minute kind of sequence at the end, even though I didn't quite like the way it ended, even in the kind of like the Ukraine section. I'm not going to go into details about the ending because obviously that's going to spoil certain stuff, but I would say I think the ending is particularly kind of convoluted, even bordering on incoherent at times. I think the movie is one of these films that want to have its cake and eat it too. It wants you to present a variety of options about what could be happening, and doesn't really want to push you in one direction or another, and I think that was a mistake. I think it makes the film seem confused. There are a number of kind of smaller issues that I have with the film. I do feel that there at times this sniper team seem a little bit carefree in some of their kind of they don't seem particularly careful at times, I will say, when they're out there on mission in kind of Ukraine. There's a couple of times where they just seem a little bit too carefree and not too worried about the surroundings and stuff, and that seems a little kind of odd. The creature effects themselves are weak. This is, on a visual side of stuff, this is by far and away the worst element. Considering, I think, for the most part, the action sequences, cinematography, all kind of very, very well, and that it really hides the budget. What clearly shows the budget is crappy creature design. I couldn't believe it. For a lot of the time, we see the creature at a distance, which is fine. But it's when we get a closer look at it, it looks just like a guy in a mask, like a rubber or a latex mask. Not even a silicone mask. Not even a realistic kind of fleshy silicone mask. No, a like rigid latex mask. I'm thinking, man, that looks really bad. I mean, we don't see it in close-up a lot, but it doesn't look good. That should have been handled better. And again, like I've said, it's trying to be ambiguous. Maybe this was a design choice. I don't know, but again, I feel the movie doesn't quite want to kind of commit one way or the other where it's going with that. So there's that. It also has for all its kind of polish, which I think it does quite well, we do get some obvious kind of like CGI blood. There's a couple of sequences where it does use fake blood, as in practical fake blood, but there are also some shots here that uses CGI blood, which again, how difficult would it have been to have blood squib, or don't have blood, or just kind of like have blood on the ground or something like that. It sometimes is like they feel the need to have this, especially when you've got this kind of snowy background. It just looks very obvious at that point. Had it been like in the dark or something, you could have got away with it. But where we have this very light coloured kind of like environment, it sticks out and all. That's a small thing, as I said. But they're kind of, there you go. So there's a couple of other kind of like small minor kind of like plot issues that again I feel that come up during that kind of like third act that I don't really want to go into because it's just going to be kind of too sort of spoilery. But I feel that it starts to unravel a little bit in that third act. But I think this is still a very well-made film for the most part. And when I was watching this, I was like, man, this is really good. I'm really enjoying this. And then certainly for the first two acts and part of the third act, I was like, man, there's a few minor kind of things here and there, like I said, but for the most part, considering this is a low-budget film, this is damn good stuff. But it just kind of starts to unravel, and I just think our writer-director here I don't think quite knew what to do with it, maybe, or he had an idea where he wanted to go, but it just doesn't translate all that well. That's my opinion. But I still liked it. You know, I still enjoyed it for the most part. It's a 7 out of 10, which might seem high considering I do have some sort of fair problems with that, the way this movie is as a whole. But it's so good up until really the third act. The first two acts are so solid, considering it's a low budget movie. I've got to say I still think it warrants a reasonably high score. Have you seen it? What did you think of it? Please do leave me a comment and I will look forward to seeing you next time.